It is Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. Happy Mean Girls Day to all who celebrate. My name is Zach Barnett. I have Doug Samuels and John Bryce with me. Scott Roussel is off to parts unknown. So we are here to preview week 6 of the college football schedule. Gentlemen, how are we?
Very good. Very good.
Very good. I did not expect a Mean Girls reference within the first 30 seconds. So that's a record.
I feel like on this podcast we have to be prepared for anything, but I was wholly unprepared for that. So,
well, for those who don't understand the reference, in the film, the main character, Katie Heron, played deftly by Lindsay Lohan, is she's a transfer student from Africa and starts to learn the ways of the American high school and gets a crush on a boy, Aaron Samuels. And one of the first things he says to her is, she asks him what the day is, and he says it's October 3rd. So it is October 3rd. So go home and watch Mean Girls, everyone. All right, on to our main topic. We are here to preview the college football schedule. We have 5 midweek games starting tonight at 6 p.m. Central God's time. Texas State at Troy. I view this as something of a must-win game for Texas State. This is a team with a lot of expectations. Blew a tough one last week to Sam Houston, non-conference game, but still rivalry game. And always tough to lose a rivalry game, and always tough to lose a game in which you led in the second half. John, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, considering the aspirations with which Texas State started the season, it's a huge contest. Really, it's a big contest for both teams. Troy's still trying to find its footing under first-year head coach Jared Parker. Lost. We're close in it at halftime on the road at Iowa, even into the third quarter, and close at halftime into the third quarter at Memphis before losing those games. Been competitive in most of their other contests, got a win, but then suffered a tough loss last week at Monroe, and they've got to bounce back as well. So they like their quarterback a lot. They're beat up a bit, but this is a home game. They've got to find a way to get up off the mat for also a program that went into the season fully being able to make a bowl game.
I originally said we had 5 weeknight games. I miscounted. We have 6, 4 of them on Friday night. The biggest one, arguably the biggest one, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. local time on Fox. Doug, Michigan State at Oregon. What do the Spartans need to do to keep this game close?
Their Achilles heel so far this season has been taking care of the football. They had 2 key turnovers, I think, before the half against Ohio State that could have made it a pretty interesting game, and they've just had trouble hanging on to the football. So, at 3-2, it's going to be tough traveling across the country to take on Dan Lanning's Oregon squad. And I see this one playing out very much like the Ohio State game played out last week for the Spartans. It's going to be tough sledding for them.
Moving to Saturday. Oh, yeah. Actually, let's stay Friday night. The team of the moment right now in college football. They're ranked in the AP poll for the first time ever. Late night game on FS1. The UNLV Rebels have Syracuse coming to town. Syracuse is playing well under Fran Brown, Kyle McCord, their Ohio State transfer. UNLV is playing really well. They're undefeated. They probably have the right quarterback in. Are they able to keep the momentum going? Or does the effects of the last 9 days catch up to them against an ACC opponent?
I think UNLV keeps it going. I've been impressed overall with what Fran Brown has been able to do thus far at Syracuse, and certainly Kyle McCord is a huge part of that. But Fran, a first-time head coach, Barry Odom, not a first-time head coach, and kind of showed that last week with the way that he and his staff navigated the exit of Matthew Sluka. Now they've got Haj Malik Williams at quarterback. He's the transfer from Campbell. He looks really comfortable all of a sudden. He's a 6-year player at the quarterback position. And so I like UNLV at home. I like what they're doing on defense, and I think that's going to be problematic. It'll be a close game for sure. But I just think UNLV is really clicking in all facets right now and are incredibly, incredibly well coached.
I think if they were going to drop a game, the way they're playing right now, it was going to be with 2 days to plan with a new starting quarterback. And and they went out there and just blew the doors off Fresno. So, big matchup with Fran Brown and Syracuse this week. They got Utah State and then Oregon State, and then a big showdown with another top 25 squad in Boise State that will get all kinds of eyeballs.
Moving to Saturday, the day opens with UCLA at Penn State in the big noon game. That's a 9 a.m. body clock time, traveling not only cross country, but it's not easy to get to Happy Valley no matter where you come from. Do the Bruins stand a chance in this game?
No.
Okay. Thought so. All right, moving right along. The one ranked matchup of the day is number 9 Missouri at number 25 Texas A&M. I wrote about this, and I want to get you guys' perspective before we move on. So Eli Drinkwitz said on Tuesday at his press conference that his assistant director of on-campus recruiting, Bria Reed, happens to be the sister of A&M starting quarterback Marcel Reed, and he said she's not allowed at practice this week. He said it with a smile, and it was enough, and he just kind of moved on and praised her, and it was kind of enough to be like, okay, well, maybe he was joking. And then on the SEC teleconference on Wednesday, he was asked, were you being serious or joking? He said, no, she's not allowed at practice. She can come to the first 5 periods, but after that, she's not allowed. I wrote about this. I think this is insane. I think it sends a terrible message to your own employee that, hey, we trust you so little that if you were at practice, we don't trust you to not tell your quarterback, your brother, what we're doing at practice and how we plan to defend him. So we're going to keep you from practice. Completely unaware that she certainly knows that if she did that, she'd be fired. So in her estimation, she'd have to think winning this game for her brother is worth more than her entire career. And I just think it's wildly paranoid and insulting. Am I alone in this? Do you guys agree with me, or do you think this is the right move for Drink to do? So, Doug, start with you.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, and I know better than most how paranoid coaches can be. So, on one hand, like in this back corner of my mind, I kind of understand it, but for the vast, big majority of it, I agree with you, Zach. I don't think it's necessary. Like you don't hire her if you don't trust her. So, I'm with you 95% of the way, but 5% of me is paranoid head coach as well. So,
yeah, I'll say Drink didn't know that her brother was this quarterback until earlier this fall, apparently during this season as it was already unfolding. I kind of get it, but I agree that it's also insulting. I just wouldn't have spoken about it publicly. And it seems sort of like he didn't have any problem talking about it. And I'm sure in his mind, he's making the decision thinking he doesn't want her to be in a compromised position. And I don't think he's necessarily, I would bet he would tell you his thought process is that he's not questioning her. He just doesn't even want to put her in this situation, because it could be her parents say, hey, how does Missouri look in defense? And she might even not even think about saying, well, look good, but this guy's dinged up. And then all of a sudden that tidbit might make its way to her brother via another family member. So I think I like Drink a lot. I think that's pretty established. I think he's a really sharp guy. And paranoia, I would say, maybe outranks competitiveness in college coaching. Like those are some paranoid dudes. So I can see.
But it also could be Drink trying to get out ahead of it a little bit, and so that after the game, if something were to happen and there was a storyline that developed, then he's kind of dotted his I's and crossed his T's. Like I could see him being the type of guy thinking 2 steps ahead, that he doesn't want this to be a storyline, so he's gonna squash it before it even starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't think he's really questioning Bria. I think it's more he's doing it in his way to protect her. You can disagree with whether or not he's protecting her by talking about it so publicly, but I think in his mind that's his thought process.
Yeah, the odd thing is he volunteered the information. I wasn't aware of the connection. I don't think hardly anyone was. So if he hadn't said anything, no one would have even known. We wouldn't be having this conversation. As for the actual game, Missouri has been a team that's been begging to be beaten so far this season. Do the Aggies oblige them?
I think so. In College Station, the way they're playing with Marcel Reed at quarterback, the way that they found a way to win last week against Arkansas, and you said it, like, and we've talked about it on the pod before. Missouri defied all the odds last year with how many times it won close games, single possession games. Really, the only bad one might have been like LSU that didn't go their way, and that was because of a late turnover. But I think, to your point, I think Missouri loses a close game.
Yeah, it's interesting how Drink and the rest of us here in the college football community view the A&M situation so more clearly than Mike Elko does. He said that it's going to be a game time decision throughout the year. Connor Wegman and Marcel Reed are co-starters, and Drink came out and said Marcel Reed's clearly their quarterback. He fits their offense much better than Wegman does, which is the absolute God's honest truth. Marcel Reed is the A&M quarterback, whether Mike Elko wants to state it publicly or not. So I think Reed plays, and I think the Aggies win. Moving right along, later on in the noon matchup, we have 3 ACC games: BC at Virginia, Pitt at North Carolina, Wake at NC State. Do any of these catch either one of your eyes?
No,
BC,
I think North Carolina's reeling a little bit, and they're trying to find answers. And Pitt's 4-0 and playing really good offensively. That's what I'm watching, just because I think I've just got my eyes on Mac Brown a little bit. The way the last 2 games have gone, I think the country is kind of watching Mac Brown probably a little bit closer than normal, especially after his comments after getting blown out by James Madison and allowing 70. So if there were one of those 3 games, I'd say I was watching closely, it'd be that one.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think more people will pay attention to the North Carolina game strictly because of the Mac Brown subplot. And this is a season you knew North Carolina would likely have some step back after losing their quarterback to the draft, but you didn't think it would be this drastic. So based on how their season has gone so far, there's more interest in this game because of Mac Brown's status. And then Cade Bell has been a nice hire for Narduzzi at Pitt, and Pitt's got a chance to be 5-0. That would be really significant for the Panthers. But the BC Virginia game catches my eye a little bit, just because both of those teams seem very improved. For Virginia to take another step towards the postseason, this is a game that the Cavs need to find a way to win at home.
In the 3:30 Eastern block, we get Iowa at Ohio State, and likely the only intrigue there is if Jeremiah Smith can outscore Iowa by himself. And then on ABC, we have Auburn at Georgia. I think most people expect Georgia to just roll over Auburn. Kirby Smart is not most people. He said this week that people aren't stopping Auburn. Auburn's turning the ball over, but they're not getting stopped. So he's worried. I wouldn't say worried. He has a healthy respect for Auburn. And at the same time, Georgia's coming off a tough, emotional loss to Alabama. John, does Auburn have a chance to shock the world here?
I don't think Auburn has a chance to shock the world here at all. Might have had more of a chance if Georgia had held on and found a way to cap that miracle comeback last week with a victory, and maybe had that euphoria carry into the week. But you guys wrote about Kirby Smart, the way he greeted his players going off the field last week at Alabama, smart coaching move. And yeah, I think Auburn, I don't think it should be a 24.5-point line, which is what I last saw in Vegas, I think. But I don't think that Auburn can win this game. And I don't think Iowa can win the game at Ohio State, but I do think the Hawkeyes can muck it up enough to make that close into the second half.
I'd like to see Georgia play a complete game offensively. They scored 6 in the first half against Clemson. Obviously, they struggled throughout the entire game against Kentucky, and then only put up 7 in the first half. A no-show in the first half offensively cost them the Alabama game. So I'd like to see them maybe put double digits on the scoreboard in the first half. Let's see if we can do that. On ESPN, we have South Carolina going on the road to an Ole Miss team that lost at home. Both of these teams share a common opponent in Kentucky. Those games went wildly different for each of them. John, who needs this game more, Shane Beamer or Lane Kiffin?
I think that game is at South Carolina.
You're correct. Yes, I'm mistaken. Thank you.
No worries. I think South Carolina has a chance straight up in this game. I think that Kentucky has caused Ole Miss to be questioning itself a little bit this week. Ole Miss is absolutely the more talented team, but South Carolina has been better than I've expected this year. And remember, this is a South Carolina team that went on the road and absolutely pantsed the Kentucky team that just went and won at Ole Miss. So I know that all those transitive properties don't always apply, but this is a better South Carolina team than I thought. And this is an Ole Miss team that, for all those chunk plays that it had in the first 4 games, still doesn't have a true offensive identity and couldn't get a defensive stop when it absolutely had to have one.
Yeah, my comment last week when Scott asked me about the Ole Miss Kentucky game was, is there any chance Kentucky wins this game? And I just curtly said no. And obviously Kentucky and Mark Stoops made me look a fool. Obviously Ole Miss's offense would slow down when they played a real opponent. I didn't realize they'd go from scoring 70 a week down to 17. I thought 28, that range would be their minimum. And obviously I overestimated Ole Miss and underestimated Kentucky.
Yeah, Doug, how do you see that matchup, especially coming off of an unexpected loss like that?
Yeah, I think that if there's going to be a letdown game for Ole Miss, it was the Kentucky game, just based on how their previous handful of games went. They were rolling. They hadn't seen a defensive staff like Kentucky has, and I think Ole Miss's roster is in better shape. I think they're a better coach team than South Carolina is from top to bottom. And this is kind of this is a gut check. Like we've got to decide who we are here. Are we a team that's in the hunt for the college football playoff? Or are we pretenders? And I think the scales for this one, for me, tip in Ole Miss's favor. I think the South Carolina game the South Carolina Kentucky game, when we look back at the entire college football season at the end of the year, that's going to be like one of those outlier games. That's hard to explain. I don't think that was indicative of how South Carolina plays the rest of the year.
There might be a bye week coming up in Ole Miss's schedule, but I know that they've got consecutive road games at South Carolina and LSU. That LSU game, always a huge rivalry game. And obviously Brian Kelly and Lane Kiffin have upped the stakes in that this offseason with their Coca-Cola comments and Smart Water comments and everything else. So that'll be fun. But they've got those two. Then I think they host Oklahoma, and then maybe they go to Arkansas and have Georgia. So this is a defining stretch for Ole Miss this season. Though he's not here with us today, our fearless leader, he had said those plucky underdogs ranked preseason number 6 could be national title contenders. We'll know across the next 5 weeks.
Staying roughly in the same time slot, we have a Big Ten game, an unranked matchup between an undefeated Big Ten team and a one-loss Big Ten team. And I'm speaking, of course, of Rutgers at Nebraska. Rutgers fortunate to beat Washington last week. I think they're outgained by over 100 yards in that game, but found a way to win. Nebraska is a completed pass away against Illinois from being undefeated. Doug, you were on Nebraska way before the rest of us. Do you see the Huskers winning this game and dethroning the Scarlet Knights at home?
I do. I think Matt Rule and Nebraska get it done this week. They had to win a gutty win last week against Purdue. But before we get to that time slot, I'm semi-offended that we just skipped over Coach Sig in Indiana at Northwestern. I mean, I think that's a sneaky good game as well. Indiana in the top 25, which is crazy to say out loud. It doesn't even sound natural coming off the lips. But I mean, Sig has got Northwestern this week, and then Nebraska, and then kind of a ho-hum stretch, Washington, Michigan State. Then they end their season against Michigan and Ohio State, who will likely both be top 10 teams at that time. So the Indiana season is getting very interesting. I think I said a quarter, or I think I said a third of the college football playoff could be Big Ten teams. Is Indiana one of those teams that sneaks in? I don't know. Right now, the way they're playing and the confidence that they have is really dangerous. But, I also think a team that is rebuilding, when they find confidence, it's really easy to overdose on the Kool-Aid and slip up. So that Northwestern game in Evanston will be interesting on the lake, and the nicest temporary on-campus stadium that there is in college football. But going back to Nebraska, Rutgers, I mean, Rutgers is playing really good football right now. 4-0. They always seem to score special teams and non-offensive touchdowns with Greg Schiano leading the way. But I think Matt Rule and Nebraska get it done.
Yeah, I don't see Nebraska squandering another home game the way it did against Illinois a couple of Friday nights ago. And I'm with you. I think the Northwestern defense will keep it close with IU. And we saw Northwestern a year ago en route to a wholly unexpected season of success sneak up and win 2 or 3 of these types of games. And so this is one for me that we'll learn much more about Indiana, I think, in this game than what we have in a lot of the others, even though we're all super impressed that they're 5-0 and went out to California and beat some random team out there that's now in the ACC, or excuse me, that's now in the Big Ten.
I skipped over that game because, frankly, I don't see Northwestern keeping it close with this juggernaut, the Coach Sig juggernauts from Bloomington. But we'll see. All right, a pair of interesting games that I want to talk about in the Sunshine State. In the night window, 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. Clemson at Florida State. Clemson is not the disaster we all assumed them to be after they were blown out by Georgia. Their offense has shown rapid improvement against a Florida State team that is remarkably still looking for their second win. Florida State's 1-4 on the season. They host Clemson. Their remaining schedule: at undefeated Duke, at undefeated Miami, North Carolina, at Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and then home against Florida. JB, we'll start with you. Where's the bottom for this Florida State team?
Well, the bottom is, frankly, when you call out that schedule, I don't think they make the postseason. And this is a game, I was studying lines earlier this week. The Vegas the odds makers had tabbed Florida State a 4-point favorite when they first set a line on Florida State Clemson. Now Clemson, I think, is favored by about 14 and a half points. So in less than half of a season, you've seen that sort of swing. So we're seeing the bottom on almost a weekly basis for Florida State. We've discussed here at length, DJU does not elevate his own play or the play of his teammates around him, not enough, not consistently. He seems to be a one-read guy and then go. They're a disaster. And my phrase is that game was so damaging because they're not done losing. Florida State is not remotely done losing, and that includes this weekend.
So Mike Norvell has taken on some criticism. Obviously, he leaned heavily into the transfer portal to build that 2023 team. Transfer portal giveth, it taketh away. So Norvell's been criticized a bit for riding DJU as long as he has, when it's obvious he's extremely limited as a quarterback. I know he's dealing with an injury, so he's out for this game. Do you think this is a blessing in disguise for Florida State and Norvell? Because at some point, you can't rely – I mean, I guess you can, but it's unsustainable to rely on transfer quarterbacks over and over and over again. And at some point, you're sending the message, well, why would a high school kid commit there if you're going to continue with transfer quarterbacks over and over and over again? Doug, do you think there's anything to that? Do you think DJU's injury is a good thing for Florida State, both immediately and in the long term?
So, look, the double-edged sword of being a quarterback, especially at a program like Florida State, is that you are going to get all the praise when things go right, and you are going to be the target when things go wrong. Florida State's issues go much, much deeper than DJU. I mean, has he had his struggles? Absolutely. But there's drop balls left and right. There's protection issues. There's defensive busts. Like it's not a one solution is going to fix everything at Florida State. And that's why the rest of their schedule is so scary, is to go into this season and think that, down the road, Florida State is not favored at Duke at the beginning of the year would have been wild. And some of those other games, there might be one other win on the remainder of that schedule with the Charleston Southern game. So the issues stretch far deeper than DJU. And I think I said it earlier during an earlier pod. I really respect the job that Jonathan Smith did with DJU at Oregon State, and now Jonathan Smith is obviously at Michigan State. But I mean, he made him look, early season like he was a Heisman contender, and then he goes to Tallahassee, and it seems like all the juice was squeezed out of that orange, no pun intended. So the issues at Florida State are much deeper than DJU.
The other game to watch in the Sunshine State at night is UCF at Florida. This is a game that I had circled along with most others as a game that was going to be real trouble for Billy Napier if they lost this game. UCF is off a blowout loss at home to Colorado, but they're going to bring rowdy fans looking for to plant their flag on the flagship of their home state. I think we're all in agreement. It's unlikely Billy Napier returns next season if form holds throughout the rest of the season. Is there a chance that we are following a coaching change in Gainesville if Florida loses this game?
I think that this would be a completely condemning and damning loss in Billy Napier's tenure in Florida if the Gators don't find a way. It would have been that way regardless of how this season was going for Florida or Central Florida, because this is one that, as Florida, you just don't expect to lose to quote-unquote little brother. But the fact that Dion, Coach Prime, took his Buffaloes in there and ran herd over the Knights last week in the bounce house, if that's fresh in people's minds and Central Florida finds a way to beat Florida this weekend, then that's just the complete disaster recipe for Billy Napier and company.
And then you look to make a coaching change before traveling to Knoxville to take on Tennessee is not when you want to make a coaching change like that, but their schedule is just, I mean, as we've covered, seems like every week it's just brutal. You got Kentucky and then back-to-back top 5 teams in Georgia and Texas after that. So not a good time.
There's no let up for Florida in this schedule. If they lose this game, they'll be 2-3, all 3 losses at home, all 3 losses, different varieties of humiliating. And you talk about toxic when you get humiliated in your own stadium. Quite often, that's the time when an AD steps in and says, "I'm going to lose everything if I don't step in here and give our fans something different." In the night game on ABC, we have Tennessee at Arkansas. John, what are the keys to this game?
For all the talk about the tempo and the speed of the Tennessee offense, it's the speed and the ferocity of the Tennessee defense that has stood out to me the most this season. And I noted a couple of weeks ago, I think on the pod, that maybe they had 13 TFLs against the NC State. NC State only had 10 total first downs. So anytime you have a defense tallying more TFLs than it's allowing first downs, that's significant. And Arkansas has been the heartbreak kids so far this season, and you have to wonder how long they can keep that up. They were the team that, yes, they broke Auburn's heart a couple of weeks ago, but then they had their own heart broken last week by A&M and Dallas. But a couple of weeks before that, it was by Oklahoma State in a game that the Cowboys should have never been able to come back and win. And to Zach's credit, you've been on the Cowboys as being pretenders much earlier than I was. So I thought there was maybe not a lot of damage in Arkansas losing that game from a big picture standpoint, but that was a game that Arkansas in a really key year for Sam Pittman couldn't afford to lose. So I question just where the Hogs are mentally. Tennessee coming off of a bye. The Vols just have too much firepower on both sides of the football for a change.
Tennessee, number 1 in the country in total defense, and not only number 1, but they are number 1 by 20 yards per game. We'll see if that continues, but I mean that's a level that I didn't personally see Josh Heupel reaching when he got to Knoxville, and we'll see if they can sustain it. But as long as they do, they're obviously national championship contenders.
They're also top 5 in scoring defense, rushing defense, and pass defense. Like that, Tim Banks has been just outstanding, done an outstanding job this year, and the offense will get all the shine, but the defense will be happy doing it behind the scenes quietly.
We get a rare thing in college football on Saturday night in Seattle. That is a regular season national championship rematch. We've only had one of those. If we exclude the SEC championship game, is not regular season in recent memory when LSU and Alabama met in 2012 in the regular season. And this is a national a championship rematch, really in name only. Obviously, Harbaugh's gone. Kalen DeBoer and all but one Washington staffer is gone. 17 players touched the ball in the last year's national championship game. 13 of them are now gone. Washington is in a complete reboot. But this is a game they need to win. They have 5 ranked opponents of their next 7. So this is a game that they've already dropped 2 games, lost a game they should have at Rutgers last week. Michigan's found its footing with Alex Orji at quarterback. It's a limited offense, but it's one that they can operate. How do we see this game breaking out?
Man, you look at what Michigan has done over the last 2 games. They've won identical scores, 27-24 last week against Minnesota. They needed a little help from the officials with the phantom onside, offsides on the onside kick. I continue to think this is not a top 10 team by the end of the year, but also Washington, like we say every week, is in a complete rebuild. So they are very limited offensively. Their defense isn't what they were last year. They're still strong in their defensive front 7, and a couple really good players in the secondary, but they're a shell of who they were last year on both sides of the ball. And I just think when you're so limited on offense and you're going against some really good defensive minds here against Washington with Steve Belichick calling the defense, and then you got Illinois, Michigan State, Oregon, Indiana on the schedule, like that's going to catch up to you sooner or later. You can't be one-dimensional and continue to win games in the Big Ten. So I don't think this is the week it catches up to Michigan. I think maybe that comes against Brett Bielema on the 19th after a bye week. But their limitations are going to catch up to them, bite them in the butt eventually.
Yeah, I completely agree with Doug. And I think I said going into the season that I had Michigan as one of my most overrated teams. I don't think they're a top 10 team. I don't think they're a top 15 team. They are a top 25 team, and Washington is not a top 25 team. And so I think the brute physicality of Michigan in the trenches is what separates this game. So Washington will be all in. It'll be a great atmosphere when their fans get up for games out there. It's really awesome, but that's not going to be enough because Michigan's going to punch them on both lines of scrimmage.
We'll call it, I guess it's the ACC After Dark game. Also the game day game this week is Miami at Cal. Miami won highly controversially last Friday night against Virginia Tech. A game they should have lost. Cal should be undefeated. Gave away a game at Florida State. Florida State says thank you for that. Otherwise, they'd be winless and the most miserable team in college football. Was last week for Miami, was that an aberration, or is this team's early season momentum slowing down and their flaws catching up to them?
I don't think Miami is by any means a perfect team, but Miami is a deeper, faster, more explosive team than Cal. And that to me is the difference in this contest. I've known Justin Wilcox for like 15 years now, 14 years since he was defensive coordinator at Tennessee. He's done a really fine job of just having Cal consistently stable and typically winning a game or two that the Bears probably weren't expected or, quote, shouldn't have won. They always seem to sneak up and lose a game that they shouldn't, that being the Florida State game a couple of weeks ago. This will be – I'm a little surprised this is the game day selection of the week. I get it because it's the two coasts and Miami being undefeated and in the top 10, but I don't think it's a great game. I don't think it will be an aesthetically pleasing game, but I do think Miami wins this game.
Yeah, and then Cal's been one of the early surprises, I think, of the college football season. And then their schedule from after the Miami game pretty favorable. You got Pitt, which will be a tough game, NC State, Oregon State, Wake Forest, all winnable. Syracuse will be a fight, Stanford will be a fight. SMU is playing really good, so it'll be interesting to see where Cal falls at the end of the year.
Speaking of the ACC, there's one game I skipped over, and I want to get your take on it specifically, JB. A noon Eastern game. This game will kick me off of my local radio show here in Dallas because our station carries SMU games. That is SMU at Louisville. John, I know you got a good look at the Cardinals last week. What are the keys to this game?
I haven't seen the over for this contest, but I'm inclined to take it. So because I think both teams are operating at a pretty high clip offensively. Tyler Shuck is doing some great things operating the Louisville offense in his first year there under Brom after being at Texas Tech, as you well know, Zach. But Louisville got Cullen Lacey back last week in a limited role, and in his limited role, he made one of the catches of the year. He would have had the best catch in all of college football last Saturday if not for some dude named Ryan Williams having all the best catches last week. And so I just think Louisville at home, they're pretty physical on the defensive line. They've got some really nice players up there. Austin Gillette is really, really good, and they move him around. They do a good job of moving him around. So I do think that Louisville being at home and being a little bit more physical on the defensive side of the ball, to me, is the key in this. That's a nice Louisville team where Brom has infused out of the portal 2 years in a row, but he still developed, I think, a really healthy culture somehow in the process. And even though they lost that game to Notre Dame last week, 31-24, they held Notre Dame without a touchdown for 38 minutes of game time. 38 minutes of game time. And they turned the ball over, I think, 5 times last week and still only lost that game by a touchdown.
Here's a Tyler Shuck fact that I bet you guys didn't know. Tyler Shuck is married, which is not all that surprising as a 6-year player. But his wedding was officiated by his former head coach, Joey McGuire. I bet he's the only one in college football to do that. Is there any games burning in your brains, on the tip of your tongues, that I did not mention before we shut her down?
I don't know that I have one. Colorado's off this week after getting that big win. West Virginia, Oklahoma State is one of those must-not-lose games for both programs. That's a phrase that I'm stealing from one of my buddies in South Bend. So it's a must-not-lose game for both of those teams. And then, I'm intrigued by Kansas, Arizona State, and then Texas Tech, Arizona, because Arizona showing that it could go win and get a huge win on the road is with Tataroa McMillan, the really splendid wide receiver. Can they keep that momentum going? And Kansas' season has just spiraled.
One game I have that's worth keeping an eye on is well off the beaten path. James Madison, undefeated at ULM. ULM has 1 loss on the year. Their 1 loss being at Texas. Hard to hold that against them. James Madison, after putting 13 on Gardner-Webb, dropped 70 on North Carolina and 60-something on Ball State. So this is a good team. Just one game to keep an eye on. That's all we've got for you folks today. So enjoy your week 6. Scott will be back with us on Monday, and everybody go watch Mean Girls tonight when college football's over. All right, we're out.